Hello, everyone. Thank you all for coming. One of my biggest fears was that no one will show up, so thank you. So I am Anton Gruniewski, a software engineer with the Tableau Prep team, and today I will be talking about some of the advanced features and approaches that you guys can use in your prep flows to make your data pipelines even more powerful than hopefully they are today. But before I begin, I actually have a confession to make. See, I am a budgeting geek. I just love numbers. And I spend a ton of time back at home just going through all of my transactions and trying to crunch some numbers and gain some insights. All this is so important to me, in fact, that I dedicated today's whole talk to the cashback system of the US, selfishly hoping that together we can look at my transactions and make my life easier. Now, with that part out of the way, let me actually properly introduce myself. Otherwise, you guys are going to think that I'm this crazy, weird person that just talks about his financial well-being all the time. As I said, I am Anton Gruniewski, and as you might have guessed, I am not from the US. In fact, I grew up in Belarus. And this kid over there you can see on the screen is me. And it is clear probably that even as a child, I was an extremely serious person. So yeah, that's why I'm not smiling probably. But when I say Belarus, people actually normally have no idea what I'm talking about. This is because it is a pretty small country. Oh, nice, I see someone actually knows where Belarus is. Awesome. But in general, it's like a very small country, and it's pretty young. It's actually younger than me. So to help you all, here's a map which shows Belarus right there in the middle. And it has roughly the size of the Washington state, where I currently live. And it has extremely harsh winter. So whenever people complain about bad weather in Seattle, I always just laugh at them, because they don't know what they're talking about. All right, what else? I also love traveling. And I travel a ton. Me and my wife, we just explore the globe all the time. We spend all of our vacation just, going places. And to give you an idea, here is a map which shows all the countries that we've been to over the last couple of years. And I know that looks impressive. And partly that has to do with, I just said, I travel a lot. But also, if you closely look at this map, US, Canada, and Russia take up like half of the space over there. So no wonder. All right, on a more serious note, professionally, I've been doing engineering for about 12 years now. And I've done everything from very small websites to much more complex systems like Tableau Prep. And speaking of Tableau, I've been with the company for 6 months now, so I am still pretty new, which means that I am still learning myself. And I'm sure you guys have a ton of experience with Tableau products. So if you have any tips or insights, I would love to hear them. Now, I told you that we're going to talk about cashback, and it's all about me. What is it in for you then? Let's quickly go over the agenda for today's talk. And obviously, since this talk is about prep, we're going to see some prep action. And I want to focus on 4 areas specifically. First of all, I want to talk about data import and how a feature of prep called data interpretation can make importing your data even easier. Also, I want to talk about group and replace, as well as some validation approaches that you can use in prep to make your flows more powerful. Then, I obviously want to mention one of our newer features, which is a script support. And this specific topic is especially important to me because I was the one who was lucky enough to work on it. So I hope that you're going to enjoy at least this specific area. And then lastly, I want to talk about some of the approaches that you can use with level of details and joins to make your flows extremely powerful and useful. And I mean, those are features. So besides that, I want for you all to have some fun in the process. So, well, let's start. And now let's go back to this cashback problem that I've been talking about. And me coming from Belarus, I actually had no idea what a cashback is. We don't have this thing back home. So for those of you who also might be from Belarus or a similar country, let me quickly give you an example how it all works. Say I am at a grocery store, and I want to pay for my purchases with my Chase credit card. Now, if I were to do that, I would get 4% back on all my total purchase amount. That is what is called cashback. But if I were to use my Amex credit card, I would get 6% back. That's because Amex actually gives me more of the cashback. But now it's too late, because I am at a restaurant now, and I'm thinking, oh, let me use this awesome Amex card to pay for my purchases there. But I can't, I can, but I will only get 1% back, because Amex is only good for groceries, not for restaurants. And if I were to use my Chase credit card, I would get 6%, or whatever the number is. If it sounds complicated, that's because it actually is. And obviously, with all that, it's hard to keep track what would be the best credit card to use in like a very specific place, be it like grocery store, your travel purchases, and so on. So today, I hope to answer two questions. The first one is, how much money do I actually lose by using wrong credit card for my purchases? And the second one is, which cards should I use instead in those cases? Now, obviously, I cannot answer any of that without data. So let's take a look at a data set that I will be using today. And it's pretty simple. It has just 4 columns: credit card, merchant, which is just a free text of whatever I felt like it putting in my transaction, and it roughly describes the place where I made the purchase. Then there is obviously dollar amount and transaction date. All right, let's jump into our areas, our features that I wanted to talk about. And the first one is, well, obviously you cannot do any prep until you have your data in Prep Builder. So my transaction data, it comes from Excel file. And I think for a lot of cases out there, Excel is pretty common data source. And in my experience, I saw 2 main layouts how people tend to store their tables within the Excel file. The first one is extremely simple. It's just a single table. It has all the columns listed one by one, and then whenever I have a new transaction, I would just add it on, like at the very top, for example, right? Oh yeah, and there's like first insight, I guess. I used to live close to Whole Foods, apparently, in January of 2017. Now, the second one is slightly more complicated. And it happens usually when I want to slice my data somehow, usually based on dates. And like in this example, I have different tables for each year of my transactions, 2017, 2018, and then at the very top, 2019. So I guess January 1st, I would just create another table at the very top, and it would contain transactions for 2020. Now, let's actually go into Prep and see how I can easily import both of those structures into Prep to do my preparation. This is our first demo. And as you can see here, hope you can see it. I have actually both of those already as my connections. And let's start with the simple one, which is a single table example. When I click on it, just as I expect, I see this table right here. And since this is by far the most common scenario, I would expect that it will just work. So let's just drag and drop that table. And yeah, it worked as I expected, so no surprises there. I have all my columns, and I have correct data types because Prep is smart enough to figure that out. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this very uninteresting table, and instead let's look at the second one. And let's start by doing exactly the same. I will just go to this table and drag and drop it to our data pane. And I can notice something weird right here. Let me just go. My fields look wrong. The first one tells me 2019 as year, and the rest is just some weird stuff. Let's look at the data. I add a step, and yeah, as I suspected, my first column is just off. It has both years and credit cards. The second column has nulls and so on. But if you think about it, that kind of actually makes sense. Because by default, when Prep tries to import your data, be it Excel or anything else, it assumes that, well, it's a single table. So in case of Excel, it looks at the very top left and top right value and thinks, all right, that has to be a single table. And that's what I see. So cleaning up this mess would be pretty difficult. Luckily, though, there is this awesome feature called Data Interpreter in Prep. And let's see what happens when I check this checkbox. Prep thinks for a second, and something has changed. I have 3 new tables over here with a little magnifying glass. And let's take one of them. Let's first remove this one. Let's take one of them, the top one, and drag and drop into data pane. And now, if I look at the columns, I actually have columns that I expected. I obviously don't have a year because that's my table name. But otherwise, I see credit card, merchant, amount, and a month when the purchase was made. So I can just go ahead and rename this column to this table to 2019, because I know that's the top one I have. And then I can similarly drag and drop the other 2. And name them 2018. And then lastly, 2017. Awesome. Now I have 3 tables, each corresponding to different year, and they have the exact same columns. And you can probably guess that the next logical step to combine them would be a union, which is like a simple drag and drop. So I drag 2019 over 2018, which gives me a union. And then I also add to this union my 2017 data. Now, at this point, I have 5 columns. 4 of them I expect to have, and they just list all the data that I have. And then there is this other one called table names. And this one includes information about where this data came from. And this is not very useful for us, because it tells me the place within Excel file where the data sits. But I can actually use that to infer my year, and that's exactly what I will do. So let's rename this column to year. And then I know that at the very top, and you can see this by cell numbers, that corresponds to 2019. So I can just change this value right here. And then I can do the same for 2018 and then 2017. Awesome. And last thing, I can change the data type now, because I know that year is a number. All right, so at this point, I have a single table which has all the information I need. It doesn't look quite exactly as the single one because I don't have a day, but I can still combine my year and a month into a single column with a simple calculation and end up with pretty much the same structure that I used to have. Not going to do it here because that's simple enough. But the point here is, that no matter your data structure, no matter how you store your data in Excel files, be it a single table or a multiple table, you can easily use Prep and its data interpretation feature to be able to flatten the structure and use it for your further data cleanup. All right, we have our data imported in Prep, and finally we can do some meaningful cleanups. And the first problem we have is this merchant column. Cashback is never unique to a merchant. Usually there are categories like flight, gas station, restaurants, and so on, which define the category within which I get different level of cashback. So what can I do to take all my merchants, which are just free text, and convert them or map them over to cashback categories? And for that, I can use a feature of Prep called Group and Replace. And I will show it to you in a second. But before that, I want to highlight another problem. Once I do Group and Replace, which is at least partly manual process, I can make mistakes. I can have some spelling errors, which, I mean, if you have two values, are pretty easy to catch. But in some cases, you can have 100, 200, 500, 10,000 values. So how do you know which of the values that you have are actually correct? And there is a feature in Prep which can help you with that. So let's just go through an example and see how it all works together. All right, so I did some minor prepping already, so I can just sort of show you what I have done. And let's not look at categories data set for now. Let's just focus on transactions. And this data set looks exactly as the one we used for the single table. So if I select it, something's wrong. My mouse, I think it's working now. Oh, that makes sense. So yeah, so this table right here has exactly those 4 columns that we saw on the previous step. And what I have done, I created a mapping over here, right? Let's go through the steps and see what exactly I have done. First of all, I removed my other columns except for merchant, because they are not helpful in this exercise. So I just removed all of them. Then I duplicated my merchant column, because this other duplicated one I will be using for mapping. And I named it category. And lastly, at this point, I can start doing some fixes to my merchant and create my mappings for different categories. For example, I see this 76 fuel here. And I know that 76 fuel is a gas station. So I can just double click and change it. Gas station. And just like that, if I search my merchants for 76 fuel, I can see in my data that now it is mapped to gas station category. And I have actually done quite a few mappings already before I started this talk. So I can just quickly show some of them to you. I can click this edit button. And let's search for this example that I used before, hotel. And I can clearly see that I have a group. And if I click on it, I can already see different types of hotel where I stayed over the last couple of years traveling that I now map to this hotel category. It's working great so far. I don't even have any errors. But let's look at another value, restaurant. Now, hopefully you can see, but something is definitely wrong here. I actually have misspelled both cases. And that is because me being not non-native English speaker, I have no idea how to spell restaurant. So what do? How do I even know that I made a mistake? Well, in some cases, Prep can be extremely helpful with its built-in features to help me identify my errors. Recently, I think in early 2019, we have introduced a feature called data roles. So if I click on my data type over here, I can see that I have a couple of them right there at the bottom. For example, email, URL, and then there are a couple related to geography, like country, zip code, and so on. And what they do, if I have a country, for example, in my data set, I can mark it as with this country data role, and it will quickly identify errors in my data. It will tell me that, oh, this country, like USSR, doesn't exist anymore, so you should probably fix that. Now, obviously, my cashback categories, as well as a lot of data out there, do not conform to all the built-in data roles that we have built-in in Prep. So what do I do in my case? Well, luckily, in a recent release, Prep has introduced a feature called custom data role. And what it allows you to do is to take your data and use this data as a template for your standard list of values. And then Prep can use that to be able to verify that you actually have correct data. Let's see it in action. So now let's take a look at this second data set that I have here. And that's just a simple list of categories that we have seen before. And to create a custom data role, it's actually an extremely simple process. I just go over here. Oh, let me zoom out. Yeah, and in the menu, I have a new option called Publish as Data Role. When I click on it, what happens is I get a new output node, but this is not a regular output node. Instead, it's a data role node. And I can just define my server, project, and category and tell it where do I want to publish this data role. And once I hit run flow over here, I will be able to take advantage of that. And I have done that already, so we don't have to actually go through the publishing process. So let's just see how it works when I use it. So I go back to my Maps tab. And just like with any other data role, I click on Type over here and go all the way to the bottom to Custom. And then right there, I already have my custom category data role. And, well, restaurant is right there at the very top. So let's select that and see what happens. Prep things for a second, and then I hope it works. Yeah, it just takes, because I have quite a few values, so it takes a second for it to pick them up. Or maybe I have some issues with the internet. This is why you don't use unreleased versions for demos. Let's try that. Oh, here it is. Yeah, so Prep immediately figured out that, oh, those values seem incorrect. So it shows me this exclamation mark clearly identifying that, Anton, go ahead and fix them. And if I search for restaurant, I can see that, yes, I actually have misspelled both values. So now, what do I do to actually fix it? Well, the way I see it, there are two ways. The first one is actually learn how to spell those words and then manually go and fix that error. But that's way too easy. So that's why we actually thought about that quite a bit, and we implemented a feature for people like me to be able to fix those errors automatically. If I go to the menu to group and replace, there is this new option called pronunciation plus spelling, which is available in cases when you have a custom data role. Let's see what happens when I click on it. Prep thinks for a second. It looks through all the values that you have in your custom data role and your values. And then it figures out that, yes, there is a data role called restaurant, and there are some values which look close enough to restaurant, so probably it's just a typo. And while it will not be able to help you in all your cases, sometimes it can be extremely useful in cases like that, when you have a simple mistake and you want to just fix it without ever thinking about it. Awesome. So at this point, what we have our mapping ready. And obviously, I can go and keep doing this process over and over again until I fixed all of my values. But for now, let's assume that I just want to jump right into the analysis as soon as possible. So I still have a bunch of unclean values over here, and I want to just filter them out. What do I do about that? Well, I have my categories, which contain correct values. So what I can do, I can just join the values. I can join my mappings with my categories. And as long as I use inner join, which is the default, what happens is Prep will filter out all incorrect values from my mappings. So I don't have to worry about them. I can get back to them later and fix them as I sort of go on with my cleanup and building dashboard later on in Tableau desktop. So yeah, now if I look at the data, and it doesn't look right. Wait. Something is very slow. OK, yeah, it's working. So yeah, now if I look at the data, I actually have just clean categories left. I don't have any values that I haven't fixed yet, which is great. But there is still one more problem. Let's look at gas station. If you look at the data grid, it has a lot of duplicates. That's because, I pay for gas more than once in my life. So whenever I do that, I put merchant as gas station. And since I create a mapping for each merchant to category, I have duplicates now. How do I get rid of them? Well, it's actually very easy. I can just go ahead and create an aggregate node right here. And normally, when you create this node, you have two things to take care of. The first one, you define your scope in which you're going to do some sort of aggregation. And then you will also use some sort of aggregation function, like, for example, total number of records or max value within a group. But you actually don't have to define this second function. Let's see what happens if I just drag and drop category and merchant to group fields. And what happens is Prep just dedupes all the values. It keeps only unique records. And if I click on gas station category now, I will see exactly two records. One of them is for the gas station that we have fixed earlier, and another one is for the gas station, well, merchant that I have used. So at this point, what we have done, we have imported our data, and then we also created a mapping which can be useful for our future analysis. So let's go back to PowerPoint. Now, we still have one piece of data missing. We have cashback category, which can help me to actually figure out cashback percentage for each of those categories on credit card. But where do I get this cashback percentage from? Thing is, we're going to use scripts for that. And why do we need to do that? Is because cashback percentage is a very weird data set. It is not static in nature. There is no CSV or Excel or SQL Server database that I can connect to and just get the latest values from. Instead, how it goes is me as a customer, I would use some sort of bank API, and we'll just make a request saying, hey, what's the cashback for, say, Amex? And bank will tell me, oh yeah, for Amex, the cashback is 3% on gas station, 6% on groceries, and so on. But wouldn't it be cool if instead of me as a user doing this sort of request, I can ask Tableau Prep to do that for me? And as you can probably guess from the title, that's exactly what you can do. That's exactly what we're going to do. And this is roughly how it works. So we have one step, one node, which has categories and credit card information. And we're going to pipe this data right into this new node that we have called script node. And it will use power of Python to make requests on our behalf to the bank's API. And we'll return a different data set to all subsequent steps, which will not only include category and credit card, but also this new column called cashback percentage. Let's see how it all works. You're going to be surprised how easy it is. So I am pretty much where we left off. I just joined back our cashback categories with our main data at this point. And to add a script node, I just like any other node type, I just go to this menu and select Add Script. And I think I have this thing collapsed. So let me open it. Yeah, and now you have a couple of decisions to make. First of all, with scripts, we support both R and Python. So you're going to have to make this decision here. For R, we use rserve, and for Python, we use tabpy. We do not ship in any of them with Tableau Prep built in, but they are readily available on the web. So you can just go ahead and download whichever one you are more comfortable with. In my case, that would be Python. So I just go ahead and select it from this checkbox menu. Now, the second step I need to do is to tell Prep how to actually connect to tabpy. And chances are, if you use your local setup, you're going to have tabpy on your laptop or computer. And if you have default settings, you will have server as localhost, and your port number will likely be 9004, which is the default for tabpy. And the rest you can just keep blank. Obviously, if you have in your company, you might have tabpy server set up somewhere on the network. And in this case, you can supply credentials like username, password, as well as your SSL certificate in case of HTTPS connection. I don't have any of that here, so I just click sign in. And at this point, we are actually ready to make Python scripts working in Prep. So I just go ahead and select my script file, which would be over here. And then the last thing left is to tell Prep which function within this script file to call. And I know that this function is called lookup, so I just type it in. And when I hit enter, what happens is Prep makes the request for me. And right there, I can see that now I have cashback percentage. It is as simple as that. Well, with the exception that you actually have to write your Python script, of course. So let me show you how Python script actually looks like. What is the structure? What is the magic behind all of that? And let me make it bigger a little bit. So this is the whole script. It's just 25 lines long. Nothing overly complicated, at least for me, being an engineer, I guess. But there are, and I'm not going to go through all details of this script, because probably your use cases are very different from my obsession over cashback. Instead, I want to focus on two things. The first one is right here on line 5. This is the function that I have specified to Prep, telling it that just use all the data from the previous node and provide all of it available to the script. And then the second function is here on line 20, which is called getOutputSchema. This is not an ordinary function. It is extremely important for Prep, even though we have never specified it anywhere in the user interface. And what it does, it basically tells Prep what kind of data should it expect back from the script. It is important because it tells Prep column names as well as data types, which might not always be available from TabPy. So in this case, I tell that, well, I will have a credit card, category, and cashback percentage. And I tell exact types, like, for example, for cashback percentage, that would be decimal. And now, if I go back to my flow, this is exactly what I have for cashback. Prep was able to correctly figure out that, yes, for this case, we have our data type as decimal. Awesome. So at this point, what we have cashback. And let me go back to my PowerPoint. At this point, we have cashback. We have cashback category. We have our credit card, and we have amounts. And it looks like we are mostly ready to actually jump into our analysis. Obviously, none of this data that we have answer my questions yet, but it should be simple enough. Specifically, let's think about the first question that I had, which is, how much money do I lose? I know that if I multiply cashback percentage by dollar amount, I will know how much money I make by using the cashback. But what if I took my cashback category and looked for all possible cashbacks for this category that I just received from the script and picked the max value, and then multiplied this max value by dollar amount? That would tell me how much money I could have made if I actually used the best credit card. And then obviously the difference between the two would be actually the amount of money I lost. And in Tableau desktop, you would do that with a fixed LOD calculation. And if you have followed today's keynote, Devs on Stage, you probably saw that we actually add support for fixed LOD. Fortunately, when I was doing this talk, they told me that I'm not supposed to show you unreleased features, so I'm not going to do a demo of that just yet. However, even today, I can use Prep to do LOD calculations, and I want to show you that. Take a look at this diagram. What happens here is I have my data source, and I branch out from this data source to create level of details. Then I do some computations. Like in this case, I do some aggregation, which can be fixed, for example. And then I merge this result, this additional computation, back into my data source. This is extremely powerful technique. Let me show you an example. All right, so here we are pretty much where we left off, with the exception of this additional part over here. Oh, let me zoom in so that you can actually see what's going on. With this additional part over here. And this part is actually how you would implement fixed calculation today in Prep without the direct fixed calculation support. So what I would do, I would create a branch with an aggregate. And this aggregate will include my group, which would be category, and then a function, which in this case would be max value of cashback percentage, which I called max cashback percent. Simple enough. And now, if I just go and join this data back on my group column, I will end up with a column. It's all the way to the right. Here it is. I will end up with new column, max cashback percentage, right in my data. And this is how you do fixed. This is just pretty much very simple. It's obviously not as simple as a single calc, but at least you're able to do it. And soon enough, you will be able to do it just like you do it in desktop. Now, there is one more lesson here. Let me zoom out. So if I look at my flow, do you notice a pattern here? This very last thing that we have done is our LOD. But actually, the other two things that I have demoed today follow the exact same pattern. They also do level of details, just in a very different way. In first case, we branched out and we created mapping for merchants to categories. And then we joined with the list of our categories to do some filtering. We deduped, and then we merged right back in. In the second case, we did something very similar in a sense that we branched out, then we used power of scripts to bring yet another column called cashback percentage, and then we brought the data back in. So this technique, which when you branch out, then do some additional computation and then merge back in, is extremely powerful. It's not limited to fixed like it is in Tableau desktop. The limit is, well, your imagination. And let me show you another example how you would use that. Thing is, it looks like we have an answer to my first question, which is, how much money do I lose? But how about the second question? Which credit card should I use instead? Well, since I have max cashback percentage and I have cashback category, I technically can look up my credit card by those two columns. And I have both of them in my script node. I have both category and cashback percentage. So if I join on those two columns, it will give me my max credit card. So let's do that. So I do join. And by default, Prep will join on credit card. But that's actually what we want to get from this level of detail. So let me remove this join clause and add category. And then there is a second join clause, which would be max cashback here and cashback percentage. And once this join is done, give it a second to actually do the join. OK, finally. Once this join is done, I can now go all the way to the right, and I can see that now I have this column, credit card, which was joined from my script node. And this credit card is calculated at a level of detail of max cashback percentage and cashback category. So I can just go ahead and name it max cashback card. All right, and it looks like now we actually have all the data that I could possibly need to actually help me with my analysis. I can now go ahead and jump into Tableau desktop and, well, try to figure out what are the answers to the questions that I had. And I have cheated a little bit, and I have created Tableau desktop dashboard already. Let's take a look. Now, I have two diagrams here and a data grid which just shows me all the transactions. And I can immediately see two insights. The first one is right here on the left diagram. And it shows me that by using my Apple card, I have lost almost $17 already. And the second insight is right here in suggested cards. There is no Apple card suggested in any of the cases, which means that I should probably just throw it away. I know that Apple is great with their products, but Using Apple Card already cost me roughly 2 burritos at Chipotle. So I should probably not use it. But joking aside, this was extremely powerful. And in just, like 40 minutes, I was able to clean up my data, bring new data from some remote server with script support, and gain some meaningful insight by using analysis of Tableau desktop. All right, let's summarize what we have done today. First of all, we have learned how you can use features like data interpreter to be able to easily import your data. Then we looked at a new feature called custom data role and how it can be useful to validate your data. Then we leveraged script support and used it to pull some data from the internet. But in your cases, you don't have to do lookups like I did. You can use machine learning. You can do forecasting, predictions, whatever your imagination can come up with. And also, we looked at this pattern when you can break up your cleanup problems into simpler subproblems and work on them independently and then just merge the data back in. This was supposed to be the last slide. Yeah, but like basically I am done. I hope you enjoyed the talk. Here is my Twitter handle for those of you who want to follow me, and my email if you have any, or you will have any questions.